Deep in the forests of Maine, a cabin stands abandoned, but locals say anyone who enters never returns the same. Tonight, we're going to find out why. The structure is known as the Blackwood Cabin, built in the late 1800s by a recluse named Silas Blackwood. The stories say Silas dabbled in practices best left alone, searching for a way to communicate with something beyond our world. He vanished without a trace in the winter of 1902, leaving behind a cabin filled with strange symbols and unsettling journals. For over a century, the cabin has sat untouched, swallowed by the forest, but its story didn't end with Silas. Throughout the years, hikers and thrill-seekers who stumbled upon it have reported bizarre experiences. Whispers in the empty rooms, shadows moving in the corner of your eye, and an overwhelming feeling of being watched. Some have even claimed to see a tall, gaunt figure standing in the windows at dusk. The most chilling tale is that of 4 college students who went looking for the cabin in 1998. They were documenting their trip for a film project. Their camera was found a year later, miles from the cabin, near a riverbank. The footage was mostly static, but the last few seconds captured a terrified scream and a distorted, inhuman face rushing toward the lens. The students were never seen again. Locals warn everyone to stay away. They say the cabin doesn't just haunt you, it changes you. Those who manage to escape are said to be forever marked by their visit, plagued by nightmares and a persistent paranoia that they brought something back with them. They become withdrawn, distant, as if a part of them was left behind in that dark, wooden structure. So what really happened to Silas Blackwood? What entity did he awaken in the heart of these woods? And what became of the countless souls who dared to cross the threshold of the Blackwood Cabin? The forest keeps its secrets well, and perhaps some doors are better left unopened. What do you think is lurking in that cabin? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this spooky story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more mysteries. Stay safe out there. Mark adjusted his camera, a familiar mix of excitement and nerves bubbling up inside him. He'd explored dozens of abandoned places, but this one felt different. The old Blackwood Manor stood silhouetted against a bruised, twilight sky, its windows like vacant eyes. Locals whispered tales of its original owner, a reclusive inventor named Alistair Blackwood, and the strange disappearances that followed his death. Most people stayed away, but for Mark, an adventurous vlogger, it was the perfect challenge. He wanted to be the one to finally uncover its secrets. He started the recording, his voice a little shaky but full of anticipation. He didn't know that the stories were only half the truth. He was completely unaware of the horrors waiting for him inside, the legacy of a man who didn't just invent machines, but twisted the very fabric of life and death. The front door creaked open with an unnerving ease, inviting him into the darkness. It was a threshold he would soon wish he had never crossed. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of dust and something else, something metallic and faintly sweet. His flashlight beam cut through the gloom, revealing furniture draped in white sheets, like ghostly figures frozen in time. A grand staircase spiraled up into the shadows, and from the top, a faint, rhythmic ticking echoed through the cavernous hall. It sounded like an old grandfather clock, but the sound was off. It seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Drawn by the strange noise, Mark began his ascent. Each step on the creaking wood seemed to announce his presence to the house. As he climbed, the ticking grew louder, more insistent, joined now by a soft, almost inaudible whisper that seemed to slither from the walls themselves. He told himself it was just the wind, the old house settling, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. He reached the landing and saw a single door slightly ajar at the end of the hall. The ticking was coming from within. Pushing the door open, his light fell upon a room that wasn't on any of the manor's blueprints. It was a workshop filled with bizarre contraptions of brass and copper, and in the center, a large, clockwork device was slowly counting down. He had found Alistair's secret lab, but he wasn't alone. From the darkest corner of the room, a shape began to stir, its form a grotesque fusion of man and machine. Alistair's greatest invention was still active, and it was hungry. "Did you hear that?" Listen. The moment he stepped inside, the temperature dropped, and whispers echoed through the walls. This is the story of Blackwood Manor, a place forgotten by time, but never by the spirits that linger within its decaying walls. For over a century, Blackwood Manor has stood on the desolate cliffside, a skeletal silhouette against the stormy sky. Locals whisper tales of its original owner, a reclusive inventor named Alistair Blackwood, who vanished without a trace. They say he was dabbling in things man was not meant to know, trying to bridge the gap between our world and the next. Some say he succeeded. Our story begins with Leo, a skeptical paranormal investigator determined to debunk the legends. Armed with his EMF meters and thermal cameras, he saw Blackwood Manor as just another crumbling building filled with drafts and creaky floorboards. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The heavy oak door groaned open, revealing a cavernous hall draped in cobwebs as thick as cotton. Dust motes danced in the single beam of his flashlight. The air was heavy, stagnant, and unnaturally cold. Leo's breath plumed in front of him. "Hello." His voice, usually steady, trembled slightly. The only answer was the faint, mournful sigh of the wind. Or was it? He moved deeper, his footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence. In the grand library, books lay scattered, their pages yellowed and brittle. A thick layer of dust covered everything, except for one book, sitting pristine on a central pedestal. It was Alistair Blackwood's journal. As Leo reached for it, a sudden, icy gust of wind slammed the library door shut, plunging him into absolute darkness. Panic flared in his chest. His flashlight flickered and died. He was alone, trapped. Then, the whispers started. Faint at first, like the rustling of leaves, they grew louder, swirling around him, coming from all directions. They spoke a name, over and over. Alistair. Leo fumbled for his backup light, his hands shaking. When the beam finally cut through the black, he wasn't alone anymore. Standing at the far end of the room was a tall, shadowy figure. It didn't have a face, just an unnerving emptiness where one should be. This was just the beginning of Leo's longest night. What did Alistair Blackwood unleash in that house, and what did the spirits want with him? We'll delve deeper into the haunted history and terrifying encounters at Blackwood Manor in our next video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what happens next. Stay safe. Out there, have you ever felt a chill in a room that just won't go away? A feeling that you're not entirely alone, even when no one else is there. I want to tell you about a place I once visited. A place where the ordinary rules of our world seem to bend and break. It started subtly, a flicker in my peripheral vision. A sound I couldn't quite place. I tried to dismiss it, telling myself it was just my imagination, the creaks and groans of an old building settling. But then, things got stranger. It began with the shadows. I was sitting in the living room, the late afternoon sun casting long, distorted shapes across the floor. I remember looking down at the shadow of a chair and my heart stopping. It moved. Just a little twitch, a slight shift, but the chair itself hadn't budged an inch. I stared, frozen, waiting for it to happen again. And it did. The shadow seemed to twist and writhe, separating from the objects that cast them, moving with a mind of their own. Then came the whispers. Faint at first, like the rustling of leaves, but they slowly grew into what sounded like hushed conversations just on the edge of my hearing. I could never make out the words, but the intent felt clear. It was a warning. The air grew heavy, thick with a palpable sense of fear and dread. It felt like walking through water, every step an effort. The climax of it all was when I saw a book on the coffee table lift. It rose just a few inches into the air, hovered for a second that felt like an eternity, and then dropped back down with a soft thud. That was it for me. I couldn't rationalize it, couldn't explain it away. Time seemed to twist in that house. Shadows moved with a mind of their own, and the air was thick with fear. I left and never looked back. Some places hold on to the past, and I believe I stumbled into one of them. What do you think? Have you ever experienced something you couldn't explain? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories. Ever felt a chill run down your spine when you're all alone? That feeling of being watched, even when no one's there. Some people say it's just your imagination, a trick of the light. But what if it's not? What if it's something else? Our story begins on a night just like any other, in a house that seemed perfectly normal. The new family had just moved in, excited for a fresh start. The kids were picking their rooms. The parents were unpacking boxers, laughter echoing through the halls. But as night fell, the laughter faded, replaced by an unsettling silence. That's when they first saw it. A child's shadow appeared at the end of the long hallway. At first, they thought it was one of their own kids, up for a glass of water. But the figure stood unnaturally still, a small, dark silhouette against the moonlit window. Then it turned its head. Its eyes burned with a darkness no human should ever carry. They weren't just glowing. They were like two deep, empty voids pulling all the light and warmth from the room. The father called out, his voice trembling slightly, but the shadow didn't answer. It just stared, its gaze pinning him to the spot. Panic began to creep in, cold and sharp. This wasn't his child. This wasn't any child he had ever seen. The air grew heavy, thick with a sense of ancient sorrow and a chilling malevolence that felt older than the house itself. Night after night, the ghostly child would appear. It never moved closer, never made a sound. It just watched. They tried everything, turning on all the lights, sang prayers, even calling in paranormal investigators. The investigators' equipment went wild. EMF meters screamed, and thermal cameras captured a cold spot in the shape of a small child, right where the shadow always stood. But no one could explain the eyes. Those terrifying, empty eyes. One night, the mother, driven by a mix of fear and a strange maternal pity, decided to speak to it. She walked slowly down the hallway, her heart pounding in her chest. "What do you want?" she whispered into the silence. For the first time, the shadow moved. It lifted a hand, not in a threatening way, but as if pointing towards the wall behind it. The family, desperate for answers, decided to investigate. Behind an old sealed-up fireplace in the basement, they found a small, hidden chamber. Inside was a single, dust-covered wooden toy. Was this what the child wanted, for its lost possession to be found? Or was it a warning about something far more sinister buried within the very foundations of their new home? The mystery of the glowing eyes remained, a constant reminder that some doors are better left unopened. What would you have done? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more chilling tales. Have you ever felt like you're living the same day over and over? For Mark, it wasn't just a feeling. It was a nightmare. He'd woken up in this isolated cabin for what felt like the 100th time. Same creak in the floorboards, same eerie silence of the surrounding woods, same unsettling portrait on the wall whose eyes seemed to follow him. He'd tried everything to escape, hiking 4 miles only to end up back at the front door, smashing the windows only to find them perfectly intact moments later. The cabin was a prison, and its walls were made of time itself. Driven by a desperate need for answers, he began to tear the place apart. Behind a loose stone in the fireplace, he found it. A hidden compartment, filled with dust-covered journals. The first one he opened was dated 1887. A woman named Ilara wrote of waking in the cabin, her confusion turning to terror as each day reset. She described trying to leave, only to be pulled back by an unseen force. He flipped through another, this one from 1952. A soldier named Thomas, lost after the war, wrote of the same maddening repetition, the same portrait, the same suffocating despair. Page after page, decade after decade, the stories were all the same. Different lives, different eras, but one shared, horrifying fate. They were all trapped. With a chilling realization, Mark looked at the last, empty journal. It was waiting for him. He discovered the truth. The cabin devours souls, trapping them between worlds forever. It fed on their hope, then their despair, until they were nothing more than echoes in its timeless prison. He wasn't just stuck in a loop. He was the next entry in a cursed library of lost souls. The real horror wasn't being trapped. It was knowing he would never be the last. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy diving into mysteries like this, make sure to subscribe for more. Have you ever felt trapped, not just in a room, but in a place that seems to be alive? A place that plays with your mind. That's what happened to Mark. It started as a simple getaway, A weekend retreat to a remote cabin deep in the woods, far from the noise of the city. He was looking for peace, for a moment to breathe. But the moment he stepped inside, an unsettling quiet fell, the kind that feels heavier than silence. The air grew thick, and the rustic wooden door didn't just close behind him. It slammed shut with a deafening finality that echoed not just in the room, but deep in his bones. At first, he brushed it off. An old cabin. A strong gust of wind. Nothing more. He tried to settle in, unpacking his bag, but a strange feeling of being watched crept over him. The portraits on the wall, with their faded, unblinking eyes, seemed to follow his every move. He tried to laugh it off, telling himself he was just tired from the long drive. But then, the real nightmare began. He walked down a short hallway to the kitchen, and when he turned back, the hallway was gone. In its place stood a solid wall, the same aged wood as the rest of the cabin, as if the door had never existed. Panic started to bubble in his chest. Ispunaruhund and the kitchen had changed too. The window was gone, the layout twisted. He was in a maze, and the walls were the maze maker. Every turn he took led him down a new, unfamiliar corridor. Some were long and dark, others impossibly narrow. Doors would appear where there were none before, and slam shut just as he reached for the handle. He started to run, his footsteps pounding on the wooden floors, a frantic drumbeat against the suffocating silence. It died out, but his voice was swallowed by the endless, shifting architecture. Desperate to escape, Mark ran and ran. But the cabin had other plans. It wasn't just trapping him. It was playing with him, feeding on his fear. How do you escape a prison that can read your mind and reshape itself with your every thought? Mark was about to find out, and the price of that knowledge would be his sanity. Stay tuned to see if he ever finds his way out. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more chilling stories. The forest floor was a blur of leaves and broken branches under his pounding feet. Mark didn't dare to look back. He could feel it, the cabin, its presence like a weight on his soul, even as he put more distance between them. The air was cold, biting at his exposed skin, each breath a ragged gasp that burned his lungs. He just had to make it to sunrise, just had to see the light break through the canopy of ancient, twisted trees. That's what he told himself. Light meant safety. Light meant this nightmare was over. He'd stumbled upon the cabin by accident, seeking shelter from a sudden storm. It seemed perfect at first, a quaint, forgotten relic deep in the woods. But the night had warped its cozy facade into something monstrous. The walls seemed to breathe, the floorboards groaned with unheard footsteps, and whispers slithered from the shadows, curling around his sanity. He couldn't remember what they said, only that they promised he would never leave. He had to prove them wrong. He risked a glance over his shoulder. Nothing. Just the dark, oppressive mass of trees. He felt a surge of hope, a frantic, desperate joy. He was going to make it. He pushed himself harder, ignoring the screaming protests from his muscles. The sky ahead was changing, a faint, bruised purple bleeding into the blackness. Dawn. It was coming. Finally, the first rays of sunlight pierced through the dense foliage, painting the forest in strokes of gold and orange. Mark collapsed against a massive oak tree, sliding to the ground, tears of relief mixing with the sweat and grime on his face. He'd done it. He had escaped. He took a moment, letting his heart rate slow, then slowly, hesitantly. He turned to look back the way he came. The cabin was gone. Vanished. It wasn't just out of sight. It was as if it had never existed at all. The clearing where it should have stood was just an empty patch of woods. A wave of confusion, then terror, washed over him. Was he losing his mind? Did he imagine the whole thing? But the scratches on his arms and the sheer, primal fear still coursing through his veins were real. Then he heard it. A faint, chilling whisper carried on the morning breeze, seeming to come from the trees themselves. It was his name. Mark. The forest knew his name. A cold dread settled in his stomach, heavier than any exhaustion. He hadn't escaped. He had just been released, and somewhere, deep in those woods, the cabin was resetting itself, patiently waiting for its next victim. The nightmare wasn't over. It had just begun.